Get ready to tune into stories of average men striving for greatness to become the leaders that are needed in their homes, in their career, and their communities. This is the Brotherhood of Fatherhood Podcast.
Hey guys, first of all, this is episode 100 of the Brotherhood of Fatherhood podcast. So I want to personally thank every single one of you that listens and has listened. Maybe you just started, maybe you started from episode 1 and have been with us all the way through. I want to give you a big virtual high five, hug, pat on the back, man squeeze, whatever it is that you're willing to take. Thank you so much. This is just 100. I know there's going to be a date when there's 500 and 1,000, and I can't be more excited. Just continue on with this work. If you haven't shared this with other people, I'm asking you right now, just share the Brotherhood of Fatherhood podcast with others, because something in one of these episodes from the amazing men that I interview will hit with somebody that will make a big difference. And the only way we can do that is by sharing the podcast, subscribing, rating it. All those things make a difference in the world. So I'm encouraged by you for listening. Thank you so much. And I honestly couldn't be more excited about episode 100. It's with Curt Storring. Curt is a phenomenal man. He's only 33 years old, yet he has the wisdom of someone much older. He literally quit his job at the age of 23 with no business idea. He took that, used his intuition and his intelligence and his skill and built, bought, and sold 7-figure websites and e-commerce brands. Like, this guy just went and did it. But not work related, but more important, more relevant, is his greatest accomplishment is he became a calm, confident leader and a father, because he was a terrible and miserable, angry young dad. These stories that he's going to tell will resonate with many of you. There's so many takeaways in this episode about how to live a better life for your kids, for your wife, and for your community. Curt is passing this along with some really great things. I'd encourage you right out of the gates to check out Dad.Work and all of the other links that are going to be in the show notes. But first, just listen to this. Listen to his story. Listen to his heart. This is a guy you need to be watching, and I would start watching now. So enjoy this episode, and thanks again for sticking with us and being one of those that has brought us to 100 episodes, and here's to 1,000 more. Hey, Curt, how's it going today?
Good, man. How are you?
I am good. I am excited for this because I've been listening to your podcast, and I can't wait for you to share your story. I think it's going to resonate with a lot of men. So for me, that's a really good sign.
Yeah. And I know this is going to be great because we just talked on my podcast. And so I know a little bit about your story, and I know some of the things that I'm going to talk about resonate, and some of the things I'm doing. I'm going to use a little bit of maybe a fitness metaphor here and there, because I know that's up your alley. So
absolutely
looking forward to diving in.
Absolutely. So what is your background before we get into like your story? What's your career background? Because you do refer to that quite a bit.
Yeah, my career background is that I haven't had a job since I was 23. I'm almost 33 now, and I worked in politics, actually. Like I did a whole bunch of jobs in university. I was like a landscape construction guy, and I worked in politics. And that was like, I don't know, man, it seems like everything is falling around you all the time, because there is so much fear and distrust and divisiveness in politics. And when my wife became pregnant, we moved 1,000 kilometers out to the West Coast to be closer to family. And I just went like, I don't want to get another job, which of course, all responsible new fathers do. And I was like, I'm just going to Google how to make money online. Like the thing that most people do when they do that is they get sucked into rabbit holes. They get scammed and they lose a bunch of money. Well, for some reason, and I have no idea why, I'll always be forever grateful to Pat Flynn of Smart Passive Income. I looked on his website, followed his guidelines, and ended up making websites that just made money by ranking on Google and getting affiliate commissions, advertising. built products. And that just started this whole cycle for me of SEO, affiliate marketing, e-commerce. I built, bought, sold websites, brands that sold on Amazon, beard companies, cat food, cat products, like a whole bunch of crazy stuff. And that leads me to today, where I still have a portfolio of websites, but I am pivoting to a more heart-centered, serving community, which is Dad.Work.
Wow. I didn't even know I was opening up this world into how it led into Dad.Work, which I think is really cool. Because that skill, the fact that you have been working for yourself for 10 years will probably make a lot of men go, that jerk, like he did it, but it's not like magic. You just did the things that needed to be done. There's a lot of just do the work there.
Yes.
The other thing that you know about me, and one of the observations I've made, is that when we first have our first kid, some stupid switch gets flipped in our head. And I think in the long run, it's a good switch. But I think a lot of times at first it can cause a lot of turmoil and problems. And that is, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to create my own business. I'm going to create my own way. I'm going to go for a big promotion and change businesses. What the heck is wrong with us?
Well, you know what? If I am thinking about this in sort of a macro sort of way, I go like, okay, something big is happening in your life. Why not batch change? And I have done that many, many times, and it's always the worst and hardest thing to do. And it's always been the greatest catalyst for growth. So for me, I was just like, I want to be there for my kids. And we've always wanted to have kids. I had them like really young, I think 23. And I was like, yeah, I just want to be there, because my dad always had this dream of owning his own business. He finally did it after, 30, 40 years in the car industry, started his own dealership. And it's like, wow, he got there. So this has been in the back of my mind. And it's like, I could stay where I was, stay in my job, have a kid, let everything just like smooth over. But there was something in me that was like, this is going to change my life, having a kid. What else can I do? So like I said, we started this business. I had no plan. I just like completely uprooted and changed my life. And it's not the only time I've done that. Like maybe we'll get into this later, I'm not sure, but we moved to Thailand for 2 years. Like we traveled the world for 2 years, and that uprooted a whole bunch of stuff, but it led to some of the greatest growth and like long-term success that I've ever experienced. And it was because I was willing to take a risk, knowing that my life was already going to change. So maybe that's what it is. Maybe we just like batch risk, because like if some of the things we do work out, well, great. We deal with it all at once.
Yeah. And I think a lot of men resonate with this batching risk. That's a really great way to like put it in view for me. I think there's a lot of men who slip into this is my career. This is how I'm going to provide for my family. And our stories are so based on this drive to create our own thing and do our own thing, but I don't want anybody to tune out, because even if you've been like a career X, you've stayed in the box. It's exactly what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to work on your pension. You're supposed to put money away. You're supposed to invest this way and do that. And you lived life inside the lines. I can guarantee you, if you really looked at your life, there's a lot of parallels here and things you can learn. So 23, your first kid, what was your experience growing up? Did you have a great father role model? Were you prepared for this very early take on of a big project?
Not remotely prepared. So like my dad was awesome in many ways, and I loved him very much. He was always physically there for us. But he chose to leave my mother and myself and my sister when I was 3 years old, just after my sister was born, had an affair, moved in with this other woman, and, had multiple relationships going forward. It was always chasing the next thing, the bigger house, the hotter wife, the better car, the better job. And so that was very much where he was at. And I never really felt as though he was bringing me along and intentionally raising me to be a man. Like he was amazing at most things. Like he was great. He built cars. He was a mechanic for a long time. He put together a 67 Pontiac Parisian 2+2 convertible, like dropped a good engine in there and just like built it from the ground up by himself. He would do construction projects at home and literally never did he actively teach me any of that? And my assumption is he had a very hard childhood and he like left home when he was 15. So like he drove across the states to get up to Canada from Florida on a motorcycle at like 15 or 16 in the 70s, because like shit was just so bad for him. So like I always thought maybe he was guarding me against, you know, the hardships of what he went through, and he's dead now, so I can't ask him that, unfortunately. So like I saw what it looked like for a dad to show up physically, but I wasn't sure how to treat a woman, because he didn't really embody that. He was always looking for the next one. I didn't really learn like what it looked like to be intentional, which I've heard your story. You know, your dad was very intentional about that, but mine sort of just drifted. And I know we've chatted about drift before as well. So like, I had no idea. The strongest man in my life growing up, and even to this day, is my grandfather. And I only saw him as not a father figure, but like this loving, accepting man. And so I think when I became a father, I was still such a child in many ways that I couldn't resonate with him as a man. So if I tried to look at like who was a good dad, I'd go like, my dad was pretty good when I was like a kid, kind of, because he played with us, but haven't really connected to him in years. My grandfather like was really there for me, but he's not my dad. So I don't know what to do now. And that just led to misery, like just abject misery and failure on my part as a father. I had no idea what to do. Like we talked about before, I was running my business like 14 hours a day. My wife had just made a bunch of changes. She was pregnant. She had a kid. She moved with me 1,000 kilometers away, no family or friends. And we were just in like this pit of misery. And for me, it came out as anger. So that's, I had no idea what to do, and I didn't have any direction. So yeah, this was a complete surprise for me.
Yeah. Anger is a very, very common thread for men. There's a lot of the emotions that come out through anger. And I don't know, you know, I'm not an expert in this, but it's definitely like misguided, misdirected, ununderstood emotion and what to do. So when you say anger, were you angry at your kid, your wife, all of the above? How did that manifest? What did that look like?
Yeah, literally everyone close to me. Well, that was the thing too. Like I was the nicest guy to everyone else except those close to me. And I believe the reason that I was like that is because of the way I talked to myself. So I drove myself like a slave driver. Like I was ruthless. The self-talk, like if I had said the words out loud to someone else that I said to myself, they would have beaten the crap out of me. You know, like it was just brutal. Like you are an idiot. You are a failure. You're worthless. If you don't get this done, there's no reason to have you even living. And I would kind of bring that to my wife and kids. Like I like to say, man, like the best way to say it is that I was just mean. Like angry, yes, but mean, like purposefully acting out because I hurt so bad. So when my like 1-year-old would come into my office, I'd freak out, like I'm working now, and I'd yell and I would get overwhelming. And same to my wife, like, hey, why did you let him come in here? Don't you know I'm working? And I would blame. I just couldn't deal with taking responsibility for everything because I felt so overwhelmed that it was actually all my fault. And so I think for me, that's where a lot of the anger came from. And nowadays, looking back, I like to see anger as kind of like an alarm clock or a flashing light that draws my attention to a problem. And this is such a huge problem. Like I think at least half the guys who join our Facebook group, I asked them like, what's the one big thing you want to get out of joining this group? And probably half say anger, patience, temper. It's one of those things. So you're absolutely right. This impacts a ton of men. And I just like to see it now as like not a bad thing. Anger itself is just an emotion. We're humans. We all have emotions. None of them are good or bad. The only thing that matters is how we express them and what we think about ourselves when we have them. So if I could then learn, and this was a very long road, and part of my work now is like, let's get men there before I did, because I really suffered. But part of what I do now is just go like, okay, what need do I have that's not being met that is causing me to feel anger? Often it's a boundary. Like what boundary have I not set? And sometimes it's simply, childhood wounds, childhood trauma. I don't feel worthy. I feel abandoned, and everything else in my life sucks because of that, because it's not something I've dealt with. And so for me, that was a huge source of anger, just resentment and anger at my childhood, not really knowing that, but feeling it deeply. So it took me a long time to get past that and use anger as like an alarm clock to wake me up to my needs, which is something they talk about in the book, Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg.
That's a good one. Wow. I mean, there's a little bit to unpack here. First of all, a saying came to mind when you were talking, and that's hurt people hurt people.
Yes.
So you said, anger, I was hurting because you were beating yourself up. And I think the ominous question, this big, question mark in the sky for men is like, why am I angry? And then they get angry that they're angry, and then they beat themselves up for their angry, when really what you have to do is take and peel back the layers of that onion and really go deep. Number one, go deep into your history, your past. Where is this rooting from? And number two, the wherewithal. This is the problem. This is really interesting because I was listening to one of your podcasts recently, and you talked about stopping and having you have a way of like, I'm putting my words into this, so you may not even relate to what I'm saying, but stopping, looking at it and asking the question, what is it that's making me do this? So for me, I have bouts of fear that I'll stop making money, fear that I won't be able to provide my kids their college education if they want it. These stupid fears. Now, if I were to sit down and logically, one thing I love to do is write that fear down, boom, and then go to the worst case scenarios. And always, unless it's death, the worst case scenarios are like, that's fixable. It's no big deal. So, but the thing I realized from your story, and maybe we get to this later, is the fact that you have found a way to interrupt that pattern, to stop and get a little introspective. And I think that's a tool that so many men don't have, and it takes a lot of work. But you have, part of your story is like, you do start to take control of this anger. So let's get to that point.
Yeah. And so let's say about 2.5 years into fatherhood, I was continuing to run my business. It was getting a little bit bigger. I had another child because I thought, like, what do you do? Well, you just have more kids. That's yeah, exactly. You can only have 50% attention on each kid. And, so surely I won't be as bad this time. Well, I was that bad again and again and again and again. And it just got to the point where it's like, something's got to give. And, I have Mack truck moments, which I talked about with Dominic Quartucci on my podcast. Like, men don't change until they get hit by a Mack truck. And my whole goal is like, I want to get guys before they get there. And like, maybe it only takes a 2x4. Maybe they just stub their toe. Let's change before that. But I was listening to a podcast or a YouTube video or something from this entrepreneur that I respected. And he just said in passing, like, oh, I've really been enjoying meditating. Like, it's making me more productive. And me, like, kind of having these issues on the side going like, I'm a terrible dad, whatever. I was like, oh, I can get better at business if I meditated. Yes. Make more money. And I was like, I'm going to do this. So I downloaded the Headspace app and I meditated. And it felt kind of good. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to do this because, as I'm sure you can relate to, productivity is like extremely important for me.
Right.
And I meditate for about a week or 10 days, I think it was. And I go out of my office right before lunch, and my oldest son does something. He screams at me or like throws a toy, something that like I would just instantly snap at. And I didn't. And I just found this like space, and it's often, I think, attributed to Viktor Frankl, or maybe I'm getting that wrong, but like, there's between a stimulus and a response, there exists a space. And in that space, you can choose how to react. And so this is so important for many reasons. One, because it stops you from, reacting negatively and screaming, but also because you can feel the feeling and choose how to react. A lot of guys are just like repress. I don't want to feel this. I'll just like be a rock. That's totally unhealthy. It gets stored in your body, gets stored in your nervous system, and like it'll come out eventually. But what this does is this understanding through mindfulness, meditation, and awareness, you both feel the really legitimate feeling, and you don't have to act like a jerk on the other side of it. And so for me, it was meditation, the very first thing that worked. And when I stopped, when I didn't yell at my kid, I went full in. It's like, wow, I didn't even know it was possible to not scream at him. I just thought, like, that's me. That's fatherhood. So it started with meditation, went into studying like consciousness and mindfulness and journaling, and eventually breath work, and eventually men's groups, and like all of these things, even, plant medicines to some degree. And it all helped this basic principle of being aware. And I think like that when I make friends, when I look at guys who I want to spend more time with, the number one quality that I see that attracts me is self-awareness and authenticity. And to be self-aware, you need to stop and feel and notice. So like you were saying about like putting a pause, putting the brakes on something to really ask yourself, what could happen if I'm fearful? Why am I angry? Journaling about that and getting to the very root cause. If you don't sit and pay attention, and that's all meditation is. It's not like doing anything, it's removing doing stuff. So you just notice what's going on. And in that, even in your everyday life, when you've been meditating long enough, you can notice, how does my body feel? Oh, I can feel a little bit of anger coming up way before it gets so overwhelming that I flip out. So I can, tamp that down. I can express it healthily. And then I can just start to notice the underlying whispers of why I feel all these sorts of ways. So for me, every dad that goes through our courses or our programs, we always start with developing a mindfulness habit, whether it's meditation, whether it's walking, whether it's breathing or journaling, something to get you more closely aware of what's going on in your world, internally and externally.
Yeah. Yeah. Mindfulness habits. I think I would assume many guys hear meditation and it's kind of wimpy. It's tied with like, and they stop. And really you got to get past that, because there's more than one way to meditate. And it doesn't have to be 20 minutes of, incantations or whatever. Is that what you call it? The chants? It doesn't have to be that. And breath work is a really easy, breath work sounds manly. I do the Wim Hof. Yeah. Like start there. It's a great place to start. And there's apps that help you through this, which is a phenomenal thing. And you do hear a lot of people say it. What's the limitation of this work that you are doing? Or is there a limitation?
Man, the limitation that comes to me is simply that you can't do everything alone. Is that what you're getting at? Like,
yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Like this is something that I talk about all the time. And like, this is what I'm building as my community of men. And I did, just to fast forward, and you can come back to any of this if it's interesting, but to fast forward, I took the next like 6-7 years to get to where I am today. And oh man, it's 180 degrees different. I am calm. I'm confident. I'm a leader. I have really, truly sat with my wounds and moved through them and recognize that more will come up eventually and they'll keep having to do the work. But I'm able to lead. I feel great most days. I'm content in life. And that's a beautiful thing. Along the way, I did everything by myself. I was like the prototypical lone wolf. If I needed to rely on anyone, I was weak. If I asked for help, people were going to think I wasn't good enough. If I didn't show up as perfect, people would know that, just this laundry list of like bad things I thought they would assume about me. And so I did it all alone. And I am amazing at doing inner work. Like that's just one of my skills. Apparently, I had no idea why. I'm so good at it. And I say that because even as being as good as I am at it, I could only get so far alone. I got, what I like to say is I think about my journey like a pendulum. On the one end, I was stuck at anger and misery and darkness. And through inner work, the pendulum swung to the center. And I like to call that place neutral. So I wasn't angry all the time, but I couldn't really feel joy. I didn't feel any love. Like I searched for love for so long and couldn't feel it, I thought. And so what doing the work with other people, and especially other men, did was it moved that pendulum all the way to the other side, which is love, fulfillment, joy, excitement, like just this zest for life, if you will. And that was only possible through continuing to do my own personal work, but then to get a group of men around me.
Yeah. So this is so incredibly important. You know, I'm very passionate about having other men in your world, and even just bringing one into my world that stretched me, cared about me, asked me questions, not to make me feel shameful, but to challenge me out of love, was an absolute massive change. It changed the trajectory. When did you first tap into groups and realize, okay, I'm not at a place where I can go any further by myself?
You know, the funny thing about this was the first time this happened was with my grandfather. And so it doesn't even need to be a huge group. It doesn't need to be anyone outside of your existing circle. It simply takes a willingness to be vulnerable and to go deeper. And yes, you need to trust that the other man or the other men are going to be there for you and to support you and challenge you out of love, as you mentioned. But I have regular meetings with my granddad. We have met, bi-weekly for a cigar and a glass of wine over lunch, and we just talk. And one of these days I was just explaining to him the pain I was in, and I was talking and talking and talking. And this is an important point to note. For some guys, talking is the best way to bring up what otherwise wouldn't be brought up, because we have stories that we tell ourselves. And only when we speak those stories out loud can we get to the truth. And so I was telling him my story, and I was, I'm so upset at my mom for doing this, and I wish my dad did this. I was just blaming. I was in victim mode. And what came out of me was, I feel like a 3-year-old boy who just wants his mom and his dad to be there for him. And then I broke down. I just started crying. It's like, where did that come from? And he just held me. He was there. He didn't say a word. He put his hand on me, and he just held space. And that was like the first time I had ever witnessed a man holding such space. And so he gave me a great gift that day. And from that moment on, that sparked in me this desire to sort of extend to other men. I had been doing breath work with a man locally. He was facilitating some breath work journeys, which are very powerful. And I actually do that myself now because it's been so impactful on my life. And he said, hey, this is a great place to get in community. Have you thought about, joining a men's group? It's like, I don't even know what a men's group is. Like, that sounds weird, dude.
Yeah, it does.
Support group for addiction. Is it like, do you sing kumbaya? Like, I'm not into that. Okay. Like I'm pretty spiritual. I'm pretty open, but I'm not into like kumbaya stuff. Let's get some work done here. And he's like, no. It's full of men. It's, full blown masculinity, but it's like really loving and supportive. And he said, just come to an open house. So I was like, okay. I come to this open house. And at this point, like I had been doing about, 3-4 years hardcore inner work at this point, and never really getting better. Like I had got, like I said, to neutral, but I was still like really longing to get fixed so that I could show up for my wife and kids and generally just stop hating life so much. So I go to this open house and I hear all these other men open up about their stories. And here's who I was before men's group. Here's who I am now. Why is this so important? Then they had us talk to the man beside us. And I was just like, I couldn't stop talking because he was just listening and he didn't try and fix me. It was like, oh, this is amazing. So I signed up that day. I went to my first men's group meeting about 2.5 years ago now. And it has just been like the single greatest thing I've done. It really, really pushed me over that hurdle of neutral to great. And so what we do is we just sit in a circle with other men. And honestly, we do processes, we do breathing techniques, we like go deep. But even if we simply sat in circle and said nothing and made eye contact, I'd probably get 50 to 70% of the value. Just being in the energy of other men is something so foreign to us these days that it is healing simply by itself.
Yeah, you just brought up a few things that I have to talk about. Number one, you dispelled a kind of a myth or a view through your own story that I believe 100% in as well, is that men want to be heard. I heard someone say that the best conversation you ever had with someone is the one where you talked the whole time. And, you think back to when you've had a really, really good conversation. You're like, man, I got to talk a lot, because we have this facade we put up. And when we let that down and actually just get to talk and listen and be heard, it is so cathartic. It's so revealing to what's really going on in ourselves. And I want to relate that. I want to use this as a teaching moment, as like always. Your wife is the same way. She just is more open to doing it. And one of the things I talk about a lot, and I want to talk to you about, working with your wife and the process you guys went through. But I have had to teach myself when my wife comes to me stressed or has a problem, I have learned to stop and say, before we get too deep, are you looking for a solution or are you just looking for an ear?
Yes.
Guess what she always says? And guess what I always want to do is the solution. But I think us men, that is not a woman trait. I think it's a human trait. We want to be heard. Is there time for tactical? Yes, we need to get in and figure out how to fix things. But half of the time, most of the time, we have to understand how we're feeling about something before we can get in and fix it. And that's just being heard. So I wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, let me just jump in here with a quote that I heard from a podcast guest named David Stegman. He started this other group for dads called the Rad Dad Collective, and I had him on my podcast. And one of the things he said, which like has just literally been in my mind for the weeks since I've talked to him, he said, men all crave a deeper, closer connection, but there's never an invitation to go there. And that sort of allows me, who heard it, and any other man who that sort of resonates with, to make the invitation. So he's like, even if you just go out with some friends or some other like dads to the park, instead of just, talking about sports, start off intentionally and be like, hey guys, before we meet here, is there anything you want to go into? Like, how's your life going? Just ask the questions and invite that depth. Because as you said, and as I'm seeing more and more, like, yeah, all guys want and need this, whether or not they have conditioning around it. Because even though you're hearing this, you might be like, well, yeah, but I'm different. And I'm just going to suggest that like, that's probably conditioning, and it makes perfect sense. Like, of course we would think that in a society that goes like, if you're not independent, if you're not a lone wolf, you're a loser, you're a woman, whatever. So there's empathy there on my behalf for sure. Like it makes perfect sense. And if you are a human, again, I'll say this again, if you're a human, you got emotions and you got to talk about them. So doing it with other men and like not burdening your wife with that, because a lot of men do that. Like that's their only outlet. Yeah, man, we're all craving intimacy, and then we just have to be invited into it.
Yeah. And I have an anecdotal thing here, story. With a few other guys, we started a mastermind. It was a business mastermind. We're going to, have calls every month, and quarterly we travel someplace outside of where we live. We get a kick-ass Airbnb that's huge and ridiculous. And we get together and we work. We strategize. We talk about things we've learned in our own groups, in our own circles. We bring them together. We work, we record podcasts, we make content, we work together, we give each other ideas, bounce things off each other. This time, my business partner and I were there, and everyone was there, just 6 men. And the night before we get started, it's like our strategy, like, how's this weekend going to look? It's not the weekend. How's this week going to look? And he goes, all right, we're going to go around the table and everyone's going to share for real what's going on in their life. Crickets. I'm like, this is the best thing ever. Like, seriously, I think I might even said that out loud, and everybody's like, the first guy that went, we knew would open up. So we opened up. We finally get to the last guy, and he is not the guy that wants to share this stuff. Like, it's just like, and he even told me last time, I don't ever want to be on a podcast. I never want to, I'm just not putting myself out there. And he even, when it was his term, he even got up and got everybody a beer. Like, he was evading to the max. Well, he came back. We were in another conversation. Hey man, we're not forgetting, it's your turn. And, dude, he went through some struggle. It took him some time to get there. Completely changed the outcome of that week that we were working. Let the guard down, shared something that was happening, and took away so much because the men listened, eventually shared stories like, hey dude, like my story was, you are not alone. Like that was all I said. Yes, and yes, you are not alone. And then a lot more talk happened to that. But that group became so much closer because of that level. And these are manly men, the grunt, all the whole 9 yards. And it works. It's needed. No matter how guarded you are, it's so incredibly important. Man, I love that you got into that men's group. And I love the fact that it's driving what you're doing now. It's so exciting. So before we forget, Dad.Work, Is that correct? Did nail it?
That's the URL. It's so weird. I know it's like usually .com.
Actually, I really like it. No, I really,
right? It's good. Yeah. It's the URL, Dad.Work, because it's men's work for dads. And, we had the URL available and it's kind of cool.
Yeah. And you do groups for men. You basically are passing on what you experience real change through.
Yeah. And that's the whole idea of this project. Like I've been thinking about this for a couple of years now, since I got over the hurdle of really hating stuff all the time. I just like, it's kind of actually the last step in the 12-step program, and like Alcoholics Anonymous, for example, is, I don't know the exact thing, but it's basically you can't help but share the message with other people. So you become a sponsor, for example. And what I feel like is this has changed my life so much and so deeply that I can't help but tell other people about it. Mm-hmm. And because it took me years and thousands of dollars and thousands of hours to like sort through this, and honestly come very close to making big mistakes when it comes to even being alive today. Like that's something that I struggled with a couple times, is just thinking like I was so bad for my kids. It's better if I'm just not here. Yeah. And so like I went from that to now loving life. I love to wake up every day. I'm a good dad now most of the time. I'm a great husband most of the time. And like life is just brilliant. And so I wanted to have a way to bring other dads along that journey without the Mack truck that we mentioned before hitting them. So if you are struggling, if you want to know how to become a better dad, if you want to learn how to open your mouth and not start a fight, but actually connect with your wife, like let's go through that, because I have looked high and low. I've talked to tons of guys now, and I'm just trying to like be the guide that shows you how you might consider doing this work to heal and grow as a better man, father, and husband. So yeah, that's where it's all coming from.
Yeah. And my favorite men who do this work are guys who've been through it, not just stage one, not just stage two, but 3, 4, 5, 6. You talked about like, I think the span of 8 years of work. And you also share in your story how when you moved, believe it was Thailand, you just hit another low and you kind of had to step up what you were doing.
Yeah. Yeah. That was perhaps my dark night of the soul, if you will, when we moved to Thailand, because I had built around me this structure of doing inner work. And I think we talked about this on our podcast together earlier, where like it's this do, so that you can like crush your inner work goals. Mm-hmm. And you never actually let anything sink in with integration. And so I had built all these great productivity hacks and these habits, and I was feeling okay before we left. Like I was still yelling, I was still not great. And I just thought, let's do something crazy. I have been an online entrepreneur for a few years now. We've always wanted to travel, maybe one day. And it was like, well, like we've got the money, I can work wherever. So like, let's just do it now. So we moved to Thailand, and man, I can't explain, if you've never done this before, I can't explain what it feels like to move to another continent and not know like where the grocery store is. Like, yes, we were in like a serviced apartment for a while, so we could go down to like the little restaurant. But like, what about milk? Where am I going to get milk? What about the kids? Where am I get like diapers from? Like, this is so scary. And so it was so much fun, but it also triggered me to no end, because all of my habits fell apart because my environment was different. And so here I am propped up by habits, which, just a side note, I think is very important. Even if you're only sort of like doing the habits to get you by, that's necessary to stop you from keep doing worse things, so that you actually have the space to do the deep inner work it takes to heal. So here I am being propped up by habits. I stopped doing all of them because I've just moved to Thailand, and I'm like, okay, what's going on? And within like a week of being there, I'm yelling at my kids. I'm scaring them. My wife is like, what are you doing? Like, you got to stop this. This is not acceptable. And I'm just like hating myself this whole time because of how I'm acting, and I'm not able to stop myself. I truly felt like I couldn't stop. And so, yeah, I found myself on the floor, this like a concrete floor in this apartment in Thailand, no idea what's going on, no idea where I am, completely alone. I was just crying. Like, I was on the floor bawling, just fists curled up. Like, honestly, it sounds dramatic, but like pounding the floor with my fists, like, oh my goodness, what is going on here? I am screwing up big time. And that was sort of the start of the deeper work that I did beyond the habits, beyond like just a surface level meditation, going like, whatever it takes, I need to get better, because this, I'm going to lose my family, and it came to that. We traveled more, we moved to a different country as well. It happened again. Okay. So what I'm seeing here is that triggers in the surroundings around me matter a lot because I am all about control. So that helped me understand it was about control. But one of the things my wife said was, if you can't sort this out, like, I'm taking the kids back to Canada. And I was like, ooh, that's something I'm not willing to risk. Like, I know what it felt like to have a dad who screwed off, who divorced and blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm not doing this to my family. And it took a bunch of times. I scraped rock bottom like 3 or 4 times along this journey, but it was that constant optimism. Somehow there's optimism along this whole journey that, like, I could get better, and I was going to apply all my skills, all my entrepreneurship, all my like hustle to myself. And so, like, I honestly feel as though my businesses were okay at this time, not great, simply because I put all of my effort into fixing me. And yeah, man, that was sort of the first one in Thailand that really got me aligned to doing this almost, I like to say, almost like work on myself full time, because I was so in such dire straits. But the Thailand was the first time that I really hit rock bottom.
Yeah. And I think it's super important to share the story of it. It's not just do this thing and everything's a trajectory towards success.
Yeah.
There's going to be
time.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one reason, like for your group, unashamedly tell people, like, just go do it. The guy has done the work, and that's so incredibly important. Not only done the work, but succeeded, step back, succeeded, step back. And when you do that, success, failure, you build in the safety mechanisms to not do it again. And then we just don't want men to get hit by a Mack truck. We want them to stub their toe and say,
exactly,
that hurts. Who can help me make sure I don't stub my toe or do anything else to that nature again?
Yeah. I mean, the risks of not doing anything are, you could feel the way you feel right now for the rest of your life. And for me, that was unacceptable. Like, I only get the one life. Like, right. Like, you don't want to feel as bad as you currently feel if you're struggling. The other risks are that, like, you could get divorced. Like, why would your wife put up with this longer than she has to? Because she's also a human being. And that's so terrible. And my heart breaks for men who go through that. But, like, you doing the work and showing up is the greatest deterrent to your wife not wanting to live with you anymore. It's the greatest deterrent to your kids hitting 18, leaving the house and never talking to you again. And if you do the work now and you pass it on to your children, they're not going to be coming up with coping mechanisms to deal with the way that you treated them. So I was scared for a long time. I was like, wow, maybe I screwed my kids up. Maybe they're going to become drug addicts. Maybe they're going to do X, Y, and Z. And I don't worry about that anymore. One, because I've come to terms with the fact that my kids' lives are not mine, which is a whole other topic on its own. But also, like, I've sorted out myself enough that I show up for them. I apologize when I need to. I love them. I spend time with them. I talk to them about my own failures and my expectations for them moving forward. So yeah, these are the risks of not doing the work. And I just don't think they're acceptable. So we are doing men's groups. The big thing in 2022 is going to be this sort of mastermind community. And I think you'll like this, because what I thought about in my head was, like, how do I tell guys what this is? Because there's not a lot out there like this. And I got this idea. It's kind of like a gym for fatherhood. And so you come into our community, you have a whole group of other men to talk to. You get put in your little squad that you can have men's group meetings with, but then you get to choose. Do I hire a trainer? And maybe that means you come on more of our live calls. Do I do this alone in, like, the cardio room, which means maybe you do, like, some of the courses that are along with it. Maybe you're like, oh, I want to go lift weights. So you hit the squat rack, which is like our weekly question and answer call. It's like this. Anything that comes up in your life as a father, I want you to be able to pull out your phone or open your computer and just have this immediate support, like, from whatever could be troubling you, so that your kids, your wife, and you don't have to go through life with no support, with nobody looking, challenging, supporting you. So yeah, we're sort of building this gym membership for dads.
I think that's
going to be amazing.
Yeah, it sounds like a really amazing concept. And a lot of men, I think you and I both have this in common, is we did all the stuff by ourselves that we could. And that is the slow way. And it wasn't until we tapped into others that that trajectory went in an exponential growth pattern. And I think that's the key takeaway. And I love that gym membership idea. Like, we have all of these things. Do the work you need to do when you need to do it. You talk a lot about your wife and your relationship. And I'm going to be brutally honest. I get a little pissed when men separate kids from wives. I just, and you may not see eye to eye to me on this, but I feel like my wife was first. That is a really incredibly, she's more like, look, I love my kids. I would die for them.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would die for them. I would die for my wife, but I literally have decided to put my wife first. How do you feel that serving your wife is serving your kids, or do you feel that way and vice versa?
I agree 100%. I'm totally on board with you. And look, I am not a, religious person. I'm not a Christian, but my wife and I went to church before we got married. We attended a class with a pastor on marriage. And one of the things he said to us was, your wife, your partner needs to be your number one human relationship. Mm-hmm. And that's stuck with us, because what I see happening with a lot of guys is they put their kids first and then they'll almost play off of each other. And so there's no like solid base for the child to trust. Mom and dad are on different teams. It's easy to be manipulative. Even if the kids aren't trying to be, it just sort of naturally happens. Resentment builds and the kids leave the home and suddenly, okay, there's no spark. There's nothing left in the relationship. So 100%, absolutely. Like, it sounds weird when people don't have kids, they're like, oh, how could you say that? Like, what about your kids? And it's like, no, you have to put in the work to build the deep relationship, because everything you do to make a better relationship with your wife, your partner, is going to be like, it's going to trickle down to your kids. Like, they will learn how to treat a woman. They will learn what it looks like to accept love and give love. They will learn like what it takes to survive on their own and then find that person for themselves, because like, I'm not giving them all the attention they need all the time. And like, we talk about quality time a lot, which is important for kids, but they have to see that there is this strong, united center of the home. So I believe very strongly in that. And yeah, we do a lot of work together, and we got lucky, man. Like, we bonded as university students. We were both sort of hurting at the time. We didn't really know it. We just had childhoods that we look back on now and go like, ooh, there's some weird stuff going on there. But we somehow did the work together and stayed together, even though I was pushing her away with my actions. Yeah. I give her all the credit for sticking with me. And I'm so grateful for her that we just ended up growing in the same direction. And now 10 years in, like, people talk about the 7-year itch, or 10 years, you don't really love each other. You gain weight, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, dude, I have never, ever been in a better relationship. And I have never loved deeper. I've never had better intimacy. Like, it's literally transcendent in some ways. Yeah. Just like beyond my physical form. Like, it's so, so good. So yes, but treat your wife, number one in the family, in your life. And man, amazing things can come from it, no matter how long you've been married.
And like, look, 25 years and we celebrated 25 this summer, and it's better than ever every day. Like, it's literally, and people say, well, you're lucky. I'm like, no, we have put in the work, and her just as much as me. But a lot of men will come to me and have done this, but you don't understand. My wife cheats. My wife doesn't love me. My wife only pays attention to the kids. And this is where I put my foot down and say, look, like, you have to take responsibility for your role. And if you're really, really, really far apart, and sometimes there is mental illness, there is things that happen. And sometimes you're so far gone, like that she's so far gone because you screwed up so much. But the thing I say is like you want to fix your marriage, draw a circle around yourself and work on everything inside of that circle.
Exactly.
And I learned that in church too. The answer to being a good parent is being a good spouse.
And the answer to being a good spouse is to be a better man. Like, that's literally this entire thing for me is like, when I tell guys, and I've used it as like a tagline in some things, it's like, to become a better father and to become a better husband, you must first do the work on yourself, which is exactly what you just said. And I don't think guys realize the power they have in relationship. And I don't mean power over. I mean power to influence. Mm-hmm. When your relationship is not going as well as you want, consider whether or not you are putting in 50% effort and expecting 50% from your wife, or if you are putting in 100% effort and expecting 100% from her back. It was told to me once Most people come into a relationship as two C's. There's a C over here, there's a C over here, and they come together to try to form the full circle. You should both be coming in as O's to create this sort of like infinite loop with one another. Yep. And so if you're struggling, look in the mirror, man. Like, it's all about you. You could show up today at 100% and love her like you've never loved her, ravish your wife for the next 1 month. And if this doesn't get better, well, okay, let's talk after that. But I promise you, you have probably never fully stepped into loving her as much as you possibly could. Yep. And working on yourself at that time. Unless you've done that, you don't have any right to say like, oh, it's just her, I have to blame her, it doesn't work, you're just getting lucky. Show up and do the work, take responsibility, look at yourself in the mirror and work on yourself before you start complaining.
When I was building out frameworks for this stuff, we built out what was called the 100-100 principle. You come in at 100%. Now, nice. Like, look, you come in at 100%. It's not 50, it's never 50-50 because that's a losing proposition. You come in at 100%. Your responsibility is 100%. Your responsibility has nothing to do with your spouse. And if they're 50, like, you're still 100 because that's going to come around. It's going to come around. The other one was the pursuit principle. And this is something I think a lot of men forget. Dude, how hard did you work when you were dating her to get laid? How hard did you work for her to say yes to getting married? How hard did you work on that first date? Just 100% laser focused. What did it take for you to pursue her in a way that she said yes to you? You should work harder than that now. You should be dating your wife. You should be complimenting her. You should be listening to her. You should be serving her. Absolutely fine. She doesn't clean the house. Tough shit. Go serve her and clean the house. I don't care if you're the one that earns the income. Go do it, because there is amazing things that happen on the other side of that. Sorry.
Yes.
Soapbox.
No,
I feel so strongly about this.
Yeah, no, me too, man. I think this is so fundamental and vital. And a lot of guys don't put the effort in to be the man of her dreams. Yeah. You know, like all women, I read this somewhere, all women want to be in like a romance novel or a romance story, a love story. And so like, what are you doing to show up as a character in that? Are you the man she drifts apart from and finds this like wonderful Casanova, or are you the man of her dreams? Because you have the power right now to start being that. Find out her love language, start like doing things that make her feel loved, and just see how much better your own life gets when your wife feels your love. I just think it's a no lose for any man.
Oh yeah. And you spoke of love language. I love that. I haven't read the book. Just my wife and I did the quiz. And like last week, and I'm gonna be vulnerable here, I told her, hey, look, remember your love language is this. That's not mine. I feel separate from you, and I see you doing all this effort, and I love that. But here's what I need. And I think that's really important as well. But more importantly, for me to know hers and just always act in that. But we have come to the point where I'll stop and say, here's what I need. What do you need? Like, we have to have that communication level where we don't build up resentment. And it's like, because we are so give and take. If you give, I'll give too. Like, and that's a horrible place to be in, but our human psyche, our human nature is going to go there. And so we have to put plans in place so that we don't slip. And then when we do, we can pop right back in to where we need to be. And the only way I can have those conversations with my wife about, hey, I'm not feeling loved in this area that's really important for me, is because we have built up so much emotional intimacy. And that is only done through intentional work.
100%. Yeah. I think intention is such a good point through all of this work. You must show up intentionally and consciously and not let inertia dictate your life. Because can you imagine being at the end of your life and being like, oh man, I didn't do any of the things I wanted to do. Like, what a waste. So show up. And just on that, maybe a last piece on relationships, or I'm happy to keep going if you want to. There are these needs, which you just expressed, that you have. And a lot of men are not willing to express those needs because it sucks when they're not met. But when you express a need to your wife because you have established emotional intimacy like you have, it is one of the greatest things. And when you express that need, it might be able to be met. And on the other hand, it might not get met. And this is where a lot of guys struggle. It's like, oh, you didn't meet my need when I told you, well, you're being frigid, or you don't love me, or blah, blah, blah. And so we have to get to the point in ourselves where we understand that we are the only ones responsible for how we feel, not our wives. We have to be 100% responsible to express those needs and then just drop it. And if we're being honest and if we're not being manipulative, when they are met, it feels so good. And on the flip side of that, if you continue to express the needs, if you are giving 100%, you also have to have boundaries around what kind of behavior you will let the other person treat you like. So if your wife continues to not meet you, if you are being, I don't know, emotionally abused, if you want to use that word, if things just aren't going good, you have to have that line in the sand that says, I won't let myself be treated like this. Let's go to counseling. Let's get some help. Let's do something so that you don't get walked over in the case that you do give 100% and you don't get it back.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a really good point, because there's this starting place, which is you. And then if you get to a certain point, you have to step in. And I have a friend that just went through counseling and it saved his marriage. Right. I mean, and he wants to send everybody to counseling now. I'm like, well, look, yeah, it's really good that there's definitely areas where you can do work yourself. And that really is where you start, is with yourself. And then you evaluate. And the other thing I'd like to say on that is the love language is another advantage of really knowing it is touch is one of mine. So what do I always find myself doing? A male, I touch my wife. And I think that that's conveying something to her. She's so much more into acts of service. And so for me, I have to say, okay, I want to touch her and that's going to give her what she needs. No, I'm going to go clean the counters because that's going to be her touch. Right. So I think we have to, that's the 100%. We're putting in 100%. We're also putting in the cognitive work to remember that this isn't us. We're loving, because that wouldn't work. Yeah. So yeah, dude, I love your take on, obviously, cause I agree with it. Yeah. Yeah. You've been married for 10 years.
In March of this year. Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. And so you're just like 33.
Yeah.
That's incredible. I wish I had I was going through my troubles at 33. And that's what I love. Yeah, that's what I love. I love seeing younger generation get this. And that's a big goal of mine. Get it. And when you're at my place, you're teaching other men how to do it.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So Dad.Work, your podcast is Dad.Work. And I've listened to it. You have amazing guests, and it's definitely a recommendation on my list. I'm subscribed. And I'd recommend other men do that as well. So your work is amazing, and it's just emerging right now. It's just emerging. And one thing I have to tell you, and maybe other people will relate to this, doing that internet work and building the stuff, that's really hard. And that's a skill of yours. So man, I know that this is going to go places because you're building the infrastructure to reach. Hardest part is reaching. And so I look forward to big things. We're obviously, I definitely want to have you on again. I think our guests would love that. And I think we're going to have some collaborative things going forward in my hopes.
Totally.
Man, I really appreciate you coming on today. It means a lot to me.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And I maybe just dropped the last one, not to be self-serving here, but we have a free 14-day Better Man, Better Dad email series. And you can just enter your name and email on our homepage, Dad.Work, and you'll get that sent to you. It's like basically 14 days of pretty long form emails of just everything that has like really, really worked and landed for me. So I would love for more guys to go through that because we've had a lot of good feedback. So otherwise, yeah, listen to the podcast. And again, I would like to have you on as well for the second time. We just recorded earlier this morning.
Yes. And I actually subscribed to that email. I'm not seeing it, but I did describe, I think it was yesterday. So I love that stuff. And I would recommend anybody take advantage of those things. They show you what he has in his toolbox. And that's really important to see what somebody's got in their toolbox.
This has been a ton of fun, Scott, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you everybody for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Brotherhood of Fatherhood podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, be sure to share it with your friends, your family, and follow us on social media. If you are a father, make sure you join our Facebook group, the Brotherhood of Fatherhood. Hit the subscribe button and tune in next time for more podcasts from the Brotherhood of Fatherhood.